which again might a silly question, but you're in a good position to answer this from an elite perspective. Although you know around London doing 19 and a half circuits. Although many of these women will be metronomic with their pace and their judgment, will it be difficult for them to remember what lap they're actually on? Because I know we've got a leaderboard which they can look to check how many laps is next to their name, or will they be judging this purely on the clock and they'll instinctively know?
This is a really interesting question. I was asking it myself when I was preparing for commentary. Do we stick with the traditional mile splits, 5k, k, 10k, 15k splits, or do you count by laps? I mean, one lap is 2.15k thereabouts. That really is a meaningless distance for these athletes. All of them will do measuring in miles or kilometres, and typically in a marathon, 5k splits is what you're looking out for. So, and there are on the finish gantry, there are lap counters. We're told there will be a bell on the penultimate lap. So I'm not sure that the athletes will be paying too much attention to the laps. Of course, they're running in a clockwise direction, which is different to on the track where you're running anti-clockwise. So a little bit different, even though many of them will be familiar with track racing.
Yeah, it's funny, I hadn't really thought about that because you're automatically thinking in laps that you're leaning to your left when you go around the home street, but it's the other way round.
On that shot there, Rod, you could see 16 kilometres, 2 miles, 6 miles, 14 miles there, 14k. So quite plenty of scope for confusion. So I think these athletes will have thought about this beforehand and figured out what they're going to pay attention to and what they're not, and they could be just simply using their watches as well. See them right on the blue line there, not wasting any distance. This lap format we have seen quite recently in Prague on the September, where a women's only half marathon world record was set, subject to ratification. That was 16 and a half laps of a 1.3k loop course.
Yes, different times requiring different skills, and remembering where you are in terms of the overall race is of vital importance. I agree with you. It's on the radar because they'll be looking, they should in theory most of the way round know exactly how far they've got to go, and it's looking good from the point of view of watching a wonderful duel.
Joyce Smith there, winner of the very first London Marathon, one of the British legends and pioneers of female marathon running.
And this shows you how far the sport has come. A winning time, 2:29:57. And that's a brilliant time for back in 1981, but it's indicative of just how quickly the sport has moved on. And do you know what, Mara? We certainly didn't think that we'd see this record broken for quite some time to come. She held on to it for well over a decade. It was hard to believe that day what Paula ran, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. 2:15:25. I mean, that was back 20 years ago now. I mean, she had run under 2:20 several times. Had male pacemakers, and of course nowhere near it. The nearest person was Mary Kaitani, 2:17:01 in 2017. It was in. It to bits, taking some 80 seconds off Paula's record. So I have to say, on that shot, you can see the bright pink shoes that all these athletes are wearing. These shoes have contributed to Kostai's record. She wore a version of the Nike Vaporflies in breaking that record. So in the last couple of years, really have transformed distance running and caused quite a bit of controversy as well. Some people in favour of them, they make you go faster, they're the inevitable advancement of technology. Others really worrying for the sport and what it means in terms of meaningful comparison with previous results, what it means in terms of, is running now purely a human endeavour, or is it a mixture of human and technology? So a lot of controversy. Of course, the other brands all catching up now. A lot of them have brought similar shoes onto the market. Not exactly the same because of patent laws. A lot of them now have these very high stack height shoes. The World Athletics' rules state that the stack height cannot be more than 40 millimeters, 4 centimeters, carbon blade inside, only one blade. Those rules were set back in January, but of course the shoes have been around since about 2016. If you look at the number of particular times in the last few years, it really shows the impact of these shoes. So if we take sub 220s, in 2016 there was 1, in 2017 3, 2018 11, and 2019 12 performers. So that's performers, not performances, performers running sub 220. If we look a bit slower time, sub 226, in 2017 there were 56 athletes under 226, 2018 86, 2019 109. So it really has transformed the sport.
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, and I guess another decent mile there inside 5:10, and Kosgei is looking really good here with Chepngetich alongside her, and Valerie Jamila, one of the other women who's broken 220. She won Frankfurt last year. She's in that group. I noticed Vivian Cheriot has drifted off that pace, although she's not running too far behind. Jamili's just on the right of picture there with the blue vest. It is such an interesting debate, and it has caused real controversy in the distance running community, Mara. I guess it's a balancing act between what counts as natural improvements as technology just gradually gets better, what's an acceptable increment, and what's changing the landscape. I mean, Hugh Brasher made a good point that when his father won the steeplechase in 56, he was wearing titanium spikes, and at stages we moved from watching records on cinder tracks to watching records, on the modern surface, and now we've got Mondos. So I guess it's a question of, is this a natural progression of technology, or is the curve getting to the point where it's beginning to look like it's impacting greater than it should do?
Oh, there's no question that it's impacting results. So in the women's marathon, estimates of the difference these shoes can make is about 3 minutes for elite women. So, for example, Athlete A, two athletes who are, let's say Athlete A is a 220 runner, Athlete B is a 221 runner, Athlete B goes and puts these shoes on, runs 218. It can influence results of races. So now, Kosgei's 2:14.04, how do you make sense of that? Nobody got close to Paula's record. If somebody got close, we would expect it to be seconds chipped off. But to knock off 80 seconds, you kind of have to recalibrate. I think you need a pre-blade shoes set of information in your head and a post set of information shoes in your head, because otherwise meaningful comparisons over time are quite difficult. Of course, as you said, titanium spikes, track surfaces, things do evolve, but in a relatively small way. I think that the key here is regulation by World Athletics. You can't stop the advancement of technology. These shoes are here to stay. This is the new world of distance running. But how World Athletics regulates them really is key to the impact it has. They've effectively frozen the status quo until after the Tokyo Olympics. They've also established a scheme in which all athletes can have access to, all elite athletes can have access to any shoe they want. So they're trying to ensure universal access at elite level, the athletic shoe availability scheme, that is. It was interesting in the men's elite press conference. Kenenisa Bekele, sadly withdrawn with an injury, he said he's had difficulties. He's had little injuries with his lower limb, his calf. He didn't really settle into the shoes that well, and that's an example of the fact that some athletes respond very well to the shoes, others don't respond so well. I think it's fair to say Koskai and Kipchoge respond very well to these shoes, Bekele perhaps less so. And he said he'd had the shoes for 6 months. I think that was the Alpha Flies actually, and he decided to race in the Vapor Flies, the older model. So lots and lots of issues to bottom. How do you enforce it? You know, race referees in theory can inspect the shoes, but you can't see what's inside the stack without cutting it open or using a scanner of some kind.
Yes, the technology is a really interesting one, and World Athletics have gone to 4 centimetres and only one blade. I wonder whether that will get even stricter as time goes on. We were talking about whether Lily Partridge would be able to strip off, as it were, and we just saw her peeling off that outside layer, and she had 2 sets of bibs, so no problem. So whilst we were talking there and analysing the shoes, and it is a debate that will continue to rage within distance running, Lily Partridge has answered that question. She's still got the arm warmers on, but she is down to short sleeves, and I wonder whether Steph Twell will shortly do the same. I mean, I guess just to round off the shoe debate, because we could talk about it all day long. In your opinion, as an elite athlete and a Commonwealth medalist, does 4 centimetres go far enough from World Athletics, or were you expecting them to be stricter with the upper limit they set on the soles and the base?
Well, it's a balance. I mean, my personal view is I wanted them to be a bit stricter. I would have said, right, how about we set it at 2 centimetres, 2.5 centimetres, and no blades. And then within that 2 to 2.5 centimetres, you can throw your best engineers and scientists at it and let them do what they can within that stack height. I think the reason for the 4 centimetres is because the blade needs a curve in it to return energy. So you need enough space to have a curved blade. 2 to 2.5 centimetres I don't think would allow enough space for a curved blade. But as I said before, we are where we are. I can't see us going back to no blades. You know, the shoe manufacturers are big supporters of the sport. They put a lot of money into the sport. They're sponsoring races, athletes. The sport can't operate without the manufacturers. So World Athletics have to strike a balance between preserving the integrity, meaning of results, and so on, with ensuring the future of the sport. So it's a really tough balance to strike. But I think their athlete shoe availability scheme is a really good start. That under that scheme, athletes currently will get at least 1 month to try out the shoes. Having heard Bekele's comments, I wonder if they might come under pressure to ensure that athletes have access to shoes a bit longer than that. So this lead group looking pretty comfortable at the moment, not looking like they're in too much trouble, but slightly separated there. Vivian Chariot, there on your left of your screen there, stellar track career behind her. She came from behind to win the 2018 London Marathon here. Very consistent performer. Magertu on the right of your screen there. Interesting athlete. She was a 2:28 runner in 2018, improved to 2:21 in 2019. So very impressive rise up the rankings, managed by Hussein Maki, who has a big group of athletes.
Yeah, and that one of her big incremental advances came when she won Rome last year with that high 2:22s. That was a 6-minute PB. Not sure what shoes she was wearing. Let's park that one for now and concentrate on this fascinating race unfolding. But in the early stages, as we're looking at Chelimo there, following the pacemakers, I I think Bridget Kosgei is looking good. Sinead Driver there. I mean, we haven't really had a huge amount of time to talk about Sinead Driver, as she's just behind that pacemaker. 43 years of age, dual passport, went over to Australia. I think she's still retains her Irish passport. Didn't really do any kind of distance running. I think she was more of a basketball player until her mid-30s. My goodness me, she's obviously running on young legs. And she set a new PB earlier this year in Japan, 68.50. At the age of 43, it's amazing.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, she ran 2:24.11 last year. I mean, how she does it at age 43 is incredible. There is this concept of training age, which is different to your actual age. So if you take up competitive running relatively late in life, even if your actual age is quite advanced, your training age, your athletic age is still quite young, and I think that applies to her. So she's looking really good, really relaxed. I think that's Chelimo behind her. So interesting debut from Chelimo. She set a half marathon PB back in 2017 at the Cardiff Half, 65.52. So interesting that if some of the athletes at the front of the race have slightly overcooked things, we could see the athletes in these later groups changing the order a bit. So interesting. Lily Partridge, excellent planning ahead from Lily Partridge, setting off with a long sleeve top on and two sets of bibs. So she's obviously thought very carefully about that. Good on her.
Yeah, we've still not seen Steph Twell peel off that extra layer. 8th in Frankfurt last October, inside 2:27. Lily would be on course for a pretty big PB here. She has gone inside the World Athletics qualification time of 2:29.30. She did that by 6 seconds when she won the British title as part of the London Marathon 2 years ago. But this is a big, useful group, and they all look pretty comfortable at this stage.
Just a moment ago, we saw Jenny Nesbitt pacing the previous group. She had a little white patch on her arm. That's a new device from Abbott, the sponsors of the World Marathon Majors, which helps athletes to measure their glucose levels while they're training. It's a new device Abbott have brought out, and it's making its debut today in a competitive context in the London Marathon. Talking of World Marathon Majors, Rob, with several World Marathon Majors events having been cancelled this year, the only World Marathon Majors events that have gone ahead are today, London and Tokyo Marathon back in March. So the current series of the World Marathon Majors, it's unclear at this point when it will conclude. A decision is likely to be made before the end of the year. So normally it runs, through several races. The athletes collect points for winning and the lower positions. But that currently up in the air because of the dramatic impact this pandemic has had on races. Of course, many of these athletes have had difficult build-ups to this race. Around the world, the lockdown and other restrictions we've seen from COVID have varied enormously. In some countries, lockdowns have been so strict that athletes haven't been able to train at all. The South African athlete, Stein, told me she lives part of the time in Dubai, and she said she had a few weeks where she wasn't able to at all. The Kenyan athletes also said, they'd had to train alone, very limited competition opportunities, very limited earning opportunities. I mean, these athletes, running is their living. They rely on racing partly for their income. So a lot of them suffering financially. And World Athletics actually did have a support scheme for athletes earlier in the year, which athletes suffering financial difficulty could apply to.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. It's been so difficult for track and road runners, especially because some of them would have been expecting, if they were in good shape and they were